On behalf of Assessment Services, Special Education, and the Office of Language Acquisition, we would like to welcome you to the 21-22 Alternate Summative ELPAC Operational Field Test. This assessment will begin November 1st and end January 14, 2022. Please note those days on your calendar. Throughout your Moodle training, you may hear the date of February 14, 2022. However, San Diego Unified is closing the window on January 14, 2021, which will allow for any unique situations to be remediated and for San Diego Unified to be in compliance. Your cooperation in completing your testing at your site by January 14th is greatly appreciated. Understanding whether a child's disability or their language is impacting their learning is the purpose for assessing students. Being able to provide the appropriate supports for both language and disability is an important outcome of the assessment for alternative summative. So what is the purpose of training? The purpose of training is to provide staff a uniform awareness to those assessing our most cognitively severe students, such as our case managers, site psychologists, site ELPAC coordinators, and paraeducators. Previously, California did not have a uniform assessment for our dually identified students with severe cognitive disabilities, and individual districts were allowed to create their own assessments. With the development of this alternate assessment, ELPAC, ETS, and the CDE have established a set of assessments that will be more uniform and concise. Starting in July 2022, all students will be assessed using the ELPAC or the alternate ELPAC for both initial and summative. So what are all the components to training? The 21-22 alternate summative ELPAC Essentials is for all case managers and site ELPAC coordinators, site psychologists, and paraeducators if they will be assessing students. Moodle is for case managers, paraeducators, school psychologists, and second scorers. It is for anyone who will be assessing the student, and it is specific to anyone who knows the student well and is identified to assess the student. Think IEP team members. Moodle has 4 training modules that must be completed to be certified to assess the student: the overview, the operational field test, the administration, and the scoring components. Once completed, you will receive a certificate showing completion of training. Throughout the Moodle training course, you will hear references to binders. I'd like to point out that there are no binders for examiners. The resources may be printed if desired, but are not necessary for training. The training frequently references these binders. There are no binders, and no binders will be made available. So why is it called an operational field test? And is it optional? Participation in the operational field test is mandatory for all sites with eligible students. This assessment has been aligned to the 2012 ELD standards via the ELD connectors. It is an entirely one-on-one administration, and the alternate ELPAC will have 2 forms, Form 1 and Form 2. Your site will be assigned to one of these forms. ELPAC coordinators can find the site's specific form number by following the link. It is on elpac.org, alternate summative assessment, under Forms Assignment, and you may type in your school's name to pull it up or follow the link included in this training. While this seems complicated at this point, many students have already been identified for the alternate ELPAC operational field test. This is a flowchart that outlines the order in which identification of students occurs to designate the alternate ELPAC. 2 vital components. The student must be identified as EL, and the student must be identified in the IEP for statewide assessments to be alternative. That would include the initial, summative, and CASP assessments. If you have a student you believe that should be assessed with an alternate ELPAC, please contact the Assessment Services Office directly. Here's an overview of the process of what happens in identifying our special education students. The special education student is enrolled at their home school. Their home language survey is completed, and if there is another language other than English in fields 1, 2, or 4, they would be identified as needing a TBD, which is to be determined initial assessment. At that point, the IEP should be checked to locate alternative testing environments. If an alternate initial or summative ELPAC are specified, we would enter the alternate test assignment for each domain in TOMS. That is done by our site ELPAC coordinator or the Assessment Services Office. If an alternate test assignment is identified for the summative ELPAC, we return into the TOMS system and select that operational field test under the Student tab. You would need to wait 24 hours for the test environment to activate. So what can you do to ensure your students are properly identified? As a case manager, again, accessing the home language survey in PowerSchool and verifying fields 1, 2, or 4 in any column, note a language other than English. Verify the IEP has the student identified as EL on the front page demographics and throughout the IEP. Verify IEP statewide assessment page for the alternate assessment. One new process is what has been termed as ALT for all. ALT for all means that if a student has been identified for any assessment as needing an alternate assessment, all assessments would be administered as alternate assessments. This language is known as ALT for all. If a student is identified for a CAW, science, they would be an ALT ELPAC. Again, its language is known as and referred to as ALT for all. The ELPAC coordinator, is who you should contact in regards to the actual setting of each student if it's correct or incorrect. We frequently get the request that the parents wish to opt out. For the ELPAC, the answer to this is no. Parents and guardians cannot opt out of their children out of the assessment for alternate ELPAC. State and federal law require that all students whose primary language is a language other than English be assessed for English language proficiency. The legal basis for requiring ELP testing is that all students have the right to an equal and appropriate education, and any English language limitations left unidentified or unaddressed could preclude a student from accessing that right. The parents can opt out of services for a child, but they cannot opt out of the assessment of the child. We're going to move on into the technical components of the assessment. As you know, this assessment is no longer a paper pencil version. It is an online computerized assessment known as TOMS, the Test Operation Management System. It is the same delivery system used for summative and initial ELPAC and the CASP and Smarter Balance platforms. It requires a staff and a student device, and it is not compatible with iPads. In order to have an effective platform, you should be in a regular habit of clearing your browser history in order to avoid testing complications. Also, a change for many assessors is the Chrome browser is the preferred browser to use for assessing students. Another add-on to clearing your browsing history is to shut down your computer. I equate our computers similar to our brains. We need to shut down and reorganize our minds. We call it sleep. This is what clearing your browsing history and shutting down your computer does for your computer. I perform these actions on a weekly basis. For our student testing devices, the requirements are fairly simple. All of our students last year were issued the student Chromebook devices. that provides automatic updating of the software that's installed, and our IT department has already configured secure browsers for the student Chromebook. Any other personal parent devices should work through the parent help desk in order to make sure that the components are available for the testing platform. Questions can be directed to the Assessment Services Office. As we mentioned on the past two slides, two devices are needed. A staff laptop, which is typically a Windows operating system, needs to work on Chrome 75 and above, and Macs and Apples are not ideal, but are getting, as long as Chrome is used, is a much more preferred platform. The student device that was issued by San Diego Unified has updated software and secure browsers already embedded. Any other devices, you may wish to contact Assessment Services before testing your students. As the world has moved to a virtual platform, it is increasingly important to remind people that all items pertaining to ELPAC, initial, summative, and alternate, remain highly secure content, meaning you may not screencast, Zoom record, photo, or otherwise copy and recreate this training or any of the ELPAC training materials. Training materials including the DFAs, test booklets, picture cards, scratch paper are all secure materials and must be securely destroyed. Secure destruction includes the action of clearing your browsing history frequently, and one recommendation is at the end of each day that you are in testing sessions, you do clear your browsing history of all of those items. Do not email information to others that include student information. In years past, the test security affidavit and the agreement have been a paper process. In the past years, ETS, the testing company, began collecting these agreements electronically. There are several times you may encounter and be required to sign. Once in the Moodle platform to access the training, and again in TOMS to access the actual test environment. For staff that do not access Moodle or TOMS but will have access to testing materials, electronic or printed, the affidavit for non-TOMS users will be on the Assessment Services website under Assessments, Alternate Assessment link. It's also on elpac.org under Security. Please make sure that all staff in a room where testing occurs has a test security affidavit signed and on file. As we move on to the test administration portion, please note this section is a high-level overview of what will be presented more in depth in your Moodle training. The alternate ELPAC estimated administration time. The alternate ELPAC is not timed. Estimated times are located in the DFAs, but do not include reading the directions. Actual testing times may be shorter if the student exits the test at a stopping marker. The directions for administration, again, are secure documents and must be treated as secure materials and locked in a cabinet when not actively using. Remember, the DFAs are the first and best resource to administer the assessment to your students. Please read these directions thoroughly prior to attempting to assess a student. The directions for administration are extremely comprehensive. They include picture demonstrations of how to log in as the test administrator and as a student. It includes a comprehensive set of instructions including helpful tools, tips, and information such as how to use the DFA, planning the testing schedule. It explains an in-test survey that you will encounter, and it goes into administering the test and login instructions. In more detail, it gives you a before student testing. It gives you tips on student engagements, how to stop the test early, participation requirements, how to expect the student responses, and scoring the student responses. So again, print out and read your DFAs prior to assessing your first student. In this particular assessment, this particular operational field test, you will encounter a special study comparison group. We are asking that if you desire to participate, it requires a non-EL severely cognitively disabled student to take the assessment. This is called the English only assessment. San Diego Unified will be participating in the English only process. Please notify via email Erica Simmons your desire to participate, and you will be asked to pay particular attention to those references within the Moodle training video. Eligible staff members will receive $150 in supply funds that will be ordered by Assessment Services and delivered to you at your site if you participate in the English only recruitment. There will be surveys built into the assessments throughout the operational field test. This will provide feedback to the testing company and the CDE as they evaluate and make modifications for full implementation of the future ongoing alternate ELPAC. It will be used to gather feedback. You will answer questions about the individual student and the test delivery system. Questions are going to be available prior to testing and will be demonstrated in Moodle. As an example, one of the survey questions is, based on your interactions with this student during classroom instruction, which of the following best characterizes this student's current level of overall EL proficiency? So they want to see if your opinion of the child's EL fluence matches the results they are receiving so far. So you have the high, medium, or low EL levels, and they are described as such. Post-test, you will also be asked to complete a survey. This will enable the testing company to make improvements in the final alternate, initial, and summative ELPACs. The operational field test will be used to gather that feedback, and you will be asked about the DFAs, the rubrics, the trainings. Survey invitations will be mailed after the testing window closes. The participation requirements are for the students. There are two types of questions, receptive or expressive. A response of at least one receptive and one expressive test question is required. A response is defined as a multiple choice selection or the no response option in the context menu. So, presentation guidelines are, how do we ensure accurate results from our student? Test content may be repeated as many times as necessary for your students. Please allow 5 to 7 seconds of wait time or consider what's appropriate for your student. Breaks can be of any length. If restarting a question in the middle of a set, first reacquaint the student with that passage and the vocabulary. Do not emphasize specific test content. Use a neutral voice and do not emphasize any words. Positive reinforcement is always important. Expressions of appreciation for the student's effort regardless of points earned. So these are all wonderful, wonderful, helpful tools that will also be reiterated in the Moodle training. Which brings us to our Moodle platform. That's what is going to explain in detail for our test examiners. So where do we start? We start with the alternate Moodle training that come from the OLA department. This is a slide deck that we are asking that you participate in to learn how to access and get the most out of the Moodle experience. We'd like to warn you at this point that once you start a module, you must complete watching the video fully. If you exit the video too soon, you will have to start that module over. Additionally, at the end of the module, you must select the blue button to finalize the module and receive your certification. This is important because people get frustrated. They'd have to re-listen to the entire video because they exited out or stopped the video as soon as it was complete. It does take at least 30 seconds for that to come up. Moodle training comes in 4 modules: the overview, the details on operational field test, the administration, and then the scoring. All 4 components must be completed in order to receive certification and be eligible to assess a student. So who gets to access the Moodle training? Staff specifically identified by the Special Education Office, the Office of Language Acquisition and Assessment Services, preloaded into Moodle by Assessment Services. If you have staff that need to be added and access Moodle, you may follow the instructions in the slide deck that the OLA office has presented to add students into Moodle as well. Training resource and materials. To access Moodle is a new link that is in the slide deck. It is a moodle.casp.elpac.org/elpac.org. So there are links provided in all of the emails. The 21-22 Alternate ELPAC Training Certification course would be the next selection. And here is the 21-22 Alternate ELPAC Examiner Certification course. Please do not select the LEA certification course. Many people make this mistake, and the key will not work in the LEA. It only works for examiner certification. Here's some special notes for Moodle. All references to binders should be ignored. There are no binders available for test examiners or ELPAC coordinators. Individuals are welcome to print material, but it is not necessary. The directions for administration are in TOMS under Resources, and so are your picture cards. Assessment Services will be ordering picture cards as well. How do you access your Moodle resources? Once you're in Moodle, you will see in Module 1, as you can see here, it gives you an overview. Once you've watched your overview video, you will see a green check mark appear. It is dulled out gray until each of these sections are completed. I do encourage you to fully read through all of these because, as it says here, you cannot, they call it a scrubbable video, which means you can go back and forth, but you can't get to that video until you watch the video once in its entirety. There are note-taking slides, which I highly encourage printing out. That is better than the binders. You can make your own notes and even put sticky notes on the pages you feel are more vital. To access the Moodle training, and this goes over in the slide deck as well, so you do not need to memorize this. It will be at, there is a new link, moodle-casp-elpac.org. The key to that training is listed here and also is in print in the email inviting you to this training. Again, the reference to binders. There are no binders for examiners, and the resources may be printed if desired, but are not necessary. The training frequently references binders, and there are no binders available. So are you finished with your Moodle modules? If you are, please send the PDF of your Moodle training certificate to melodymargetta@sandy.net or ola@sandy.net. So let's put it all together. Assessment Services has a series on its web internal portal titled How Do I? It goes through certain things. They're very short, simple 1-minute videos on clearing your browsing history, how to look at the TOMS system, how to update a test setting in TOMS, running basic reports, starting a test session, and Zoom video links. But I would like to remind you that your directions for administration should be always referenced, as many of your questions will be answered in that platform. How do you access these resources? If you are on the staff portal and you are logged in, there is an alternate ELPAC operational field test button. You may select. Our resources are in that web page. Do you have any questions regarding administering the alternate ELPAC? Please contact me, Ann Runge, at arunge@sandy.net. I'd like to thank you for your time today and have a great day.